All right, so to officially begin, let's welcome Sarah Routhier to the call. Sarah, take it away.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be part of OPP Beyond the Blue organization, and which is a chapter of Canada Beyond the Blue. And I just want to say a special thank you to everyone who's taking the time out of their busy lives to join us on Bell Let's Talk Day. This day has become special to me and to our family, and hopefully, this is a way that we can pay it forward. So I know you're all busy, so thank you again for taking some time out of your schedules. This is such a unique opportunity that we all get to meet virtually. I don't think we could have ever done this with all of you in the same room. I'm super curious to find out where you are tuning in from. So if you have a minute, just write in the chat real quick where you're located, because I have a feeling we have people from all across Ontario, even all across Canada. Martintown, I know where that is. That's close to where I live. Niagara Falls, we got Thunder Bay, holy smokes. Ottawa, London. I can't read this fast, you guys. A lot from Ontario. Wow, this is amazing. This just goes to show the reach of what we can do virtually now, which we would have never done, something like this a couple years ago. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm recognizing some names here too, some close to me, some far away. So this is really great to see you all here. The other really neat thing about being able to do this virtually is that we get to include our loved ones. A lot of times when you're in policing and you do a lot of training, your spouses or family members don't get to join. So if you have spouses, family members, people that are in your house right now that are not sitting beside you and they're in another room, take a minute, go grab them, because you're gonna want them to sit here and support you listening to me speak. So make sure everybody that is in your household is available and ready to listen. And if they're not, like Jacqueline mentioned, we are going to record this so we can share it to many other people afterwards. Let's see if I can share my screen and this will work. Hopefully you can all see that. So my name is Sarah, and I am the widow of Ontario Provincial Police Sergeant Sylvain Routhier. I should mention, feel free to write any questions in the chat as I'm talking. I can't see them right now, but I will be sure to address them towards the end, and Jacqueline will keep track of all the questions for us as well. I'm here to share Sylvain's story with all of you. I'm going to share who he was as a person, all about his policing career. I'm going to share his struggle with a mental illness, and I'm going to talk in depth about his death. As I share my story with you, my hope is that you can learn from the tragedy we've been through. My hope is that you can take a look at yourselves, your police officers, your spouses, your detachments, and ask yourself some serious questions as you're listening to my talk, as you have time to reflect afterwards in the next coming days, next coming months and years. And here's the questions I have for you. Am I doing everything I can to take care of my mental health today? Is my workplace fostering an environment that is free of mental health stigmas? Do we have the proper supports in place if I need help, if my coworker needs help, or if one of my family members needs help? Are we doing everything we can right now to prevent another suicide? I want to start by just sharing some stats with you. These are Canadian stats. So in Canada, first responders experience PTSD at 2 times the rate versus the general population. It is estimated that 70,000 Canadian first responders have experienced PTSD in their lifetime. 11% of first responders have reported suicidal thoughts as a result of their jobs. And in 2018, 9 deaths by suicide occurred among serving and retired police officers in just Ontario, including my late husband, Sgt Sylvain Routhier. This number was thought to be unprecedented. Sylvain and I's story began, we met in high school in Cornwall, Ontario, where I grew up, and Sylvain moved there to play hockey. He played on my brother's hockey team, and we quickly fell in love at the young age of 18 and 19. After graduating high school, I moved to Ottawa, Sylvain moved to Montreal, and we went to college. He took police foundations, and I initially took nursing. After we were done college, he moved to Ottawa so we could be together, and we got married at the young age of 23, and very quickly had 3 beautiful young children. So this is Jacob, Nicholas, and Emily. I'm going to try to paint a picture of who Sylvain was for those of you that didn't have the fortunate opportunity of knowing him or working with him. Sylvain was just an all-around incredible person. He was an amazing father to our kids. He was hands-on, he was loving and caring. You know, I only wanted 2 kids and he wanted 6, and the reason why we kept having more kids was because he was such an incredible father. I don't think I could quite have 6. Sylvain would do anything for his kids. He loved them so unbelievably much. He taught them how to play hockey from a very early age. Basically, as soon as they could walk, he had them on skates. Hockey was a huge passion of Sylvain's. He taught our kids how to fish. We would go boating, spend a lot of our summers camping, enjoying the outdoors. He was very patient with them and very kind. Sylvain also wanted to give back to our community. When he moved to Cornwall to play hockey, he was billeted by families. And we also became a billet family when we moved to Belleville, and we had 2 billet sons over the years. Sylvain wanted to give young hockey players a home, some security while they were working on their hockey goals. We did a lot of things together as a family. We took a lot of vacations. We would go to hockey games. He would take the kids to NHL games. Hockey was, like I said, a big part of our family. So much so, when we moved to Belleville and we were looking to buy a house, I needed a house with, you know, a nice kitchen and some bedrooms and that type of stuff. And his priority was a really big flat backyard so he could build a hockey rink. And this was our hockey rink in our backyard. Sylvain would spend hours researching on how to build it, how to make ice, how to tend to it. He eventually built boards. He had a makeshift Zamboni. Every year he would add more and more to the rink. And he would spend hours outside skating with the kids. He'd strap on goalie equipment and let the kids take shots on him. We used to have all the kids' hockey teams over once a year for a big hockey party. And our rink was known where we lived. People, you could see it from the road when you drove by, and you knew where all the neighborhood kids and our family would be hanging out skating through the winters. Sylvain's personality, he was really laid back, calm, easygoing person. Everybody liked him. I'm not just saying this, he lit up a room. He was charismatic. He was easy to talk to. People would come to him for questions, for advice. He had made friends anywhere we lived. I never knew of anyone that didn't like them. He was patient and he was extremely athletic. He excelled at pretty much anything he tried. After graduating college, Sylvain wanted to be a police officer. And, at the age of 19, nobody would hire him. So he got a job at Parliament, working for the House of Commons, doing security. And he loved working there. They had a Parliament hockey team, made a lot of friends. He was really good with what he did. And he quickly got promoted to, what they call as the Prime Minister's detail. So as he worked in Parliament, he would escort our Prime Minister around the building and, wear an earpiece and a secured gun and in a suit. And after a couple years of doing that, he found it too boring. He said nothing ever happened. Little did he know that many years later in 2014, he would actually be back at Parliament when there was a shooting there. But Sylvain applied to every police force he could. He just wanted to be a police officer so badly. And the OPP was the first police force to hire him. So at the young age of 23, Sylvain was hired by the OPP. And we moved from Ottawa to Sarnia area. So Lambton County was his first detachment. As a young police officer, when we didn't have kids at the time, he was really keen. He was so excited to go to work every day. He was naive. He took as many overtime calls, as many overtime shifts as he could, paid duties. He would come home so excited to tell me about the people he would arrest or the calls he got to go on and the excitement of his job. And he was truly happy. He was really happy with what he did for a living. Very early on, in fact, when he was in police college, they had a presentation. Somebody from the OPP Tactics and Rescue team came and did a presentation telling them about the TACS team, the TRUE team. And in police college, he told me, I'm going to do that someday. He knew that was his thing, that the TRUE team was going to be his calling. So sure enough, when the TRUE team changed some of the requirements, and after 3 years of being a constable, you could apply to be on the TRUE team. Sylvain applied. He trained vigorously for months, and a lot of people he worked with discouraged him in trying out. This was elite of the elitists that would make this TAC team. And a lot of people that tried out didn't make it. And Sylvain was very ambitious and when he had his mind set to something, he accomplished it. And his first time trying out for the TRUE team, he made it. There was 31 applicants and they finished with 5 candidates that made it through the training. I was so proud of him. He was so excited about this new position. And for anybody who's listening and that's not a police officer that doesn't know what a TAC team does, this is basically the team that the police call when they need help. Dealing with a lot of high-risk situations, a lot of barricaded calls, anybody with weapons. Sylvain was trained as a sniper, and his specialty was rappelling. So he would rappel down buildings and go and train other police forces on rappelling. And he would come home from being on the TRUE team and tell me all these crazy things they did, like jumping out of helicopters and rappelling down skyscrapers and, knocking down doors and arresting people. And it was very much a team atmosphere, and he absolutely loved it. He got to spare on the West team in London, and then we moved to Aurelia, and he was on the Central team there for a couple years. And as we started having our kids, we felt like we were still really far away from family. So we moved to the East team, which was located in Kingston, Ontario. And, we became really close with, the officers he worked with every day and their families. It was very much a close family feeling. After 6 years on the TRUE team, the difficulty with being on a specialty team is they get called out a lot. So there was a lot of in the middle of the night, Sylvain would have to take off, and he could be going anywhere in the whole province. I wouldn't know, where he was going or when he would come back. And it made it very difficult on our family life. With 3 young children at the time, Sylvain was busy coaching all of them hockey. He'd often get called out in the middle of hockey games. He would get called out when we were camping somewhere and leave me at a campsite with kids to take down a tent trailer. I had been left at restaurants before. He missed kids' birthdays. He missed Christmas. He missed weddings. He sacrificed his family life for a job that he loved so much, and he wanted to help people. So after 6 years of being on the TRU team, he made a really difficult call and decided to go back to the road as a regular constable. Shift work would give us a bit more of an idea of his schedule and when he could be home, and what we had to arrange our lives around. Anyway, he started thinking about, what's the next thing for me? He had his eyes set on becoming a sergeant someday, and going back to the road and getting a bit more experience would set him up for that type of promotion. So after 6 years, he went back to the road at the Napanee detachment. And, after 6 years being on the TRU team, almost 9 years as a police officer, people looked up to him from his experience over years of his career and the things that he dealt with. And after a couple years on the road, he decided to apply for a sergeant position. There was a posting that had come out. And even though he hadn't had the opportunity to do any acting time, he thought, I'll try this. And like I said, when he set his mind on something, he did it. And the sergeant posting came up. They had 18 applicants for, I think it was 3 or 4 positions. And he didn't think he was going to get it. He thought, I'll go through the process and see what it's about. And then, the next time I apply, I'll have an idea of what I need to work on. And sure enough, just before Christmas, I remember it like it was yesterday. He got a phone call and he was chosen as one of the sergeants. And he was going to start at the Quinte West detachment, which wasn't far from where we live. So he was so excited. It was like Christmas morning, watching almost like a young boy on Christmas morning, jumping up and down in our kitchen. I was so excited and so happy for him that he had, achieved another one of his goals. So Sylvain started his sergeant position at the Quinte West detachment in January of 2018. At this point, he had been a police officer into his career for 13 years. In those 13 years, he never once saw a counselor. I never thought he needed to see someone. He would often tell me about calls he would go on. It slowly slowed down over the years. That excitement in his beginning years faded. And I could tell he started holding back and not wanting to tell me everything that happened at work. I used to hate going to Christmas parties because I would find out stuff. They would all start talking about this call we went on, or do you remember this situation? And some of it was really outrageous. And I just couldn't believe this was the first time I was hearing about these things he had dealt with. And on the car ride home, I used to always say, why didn't you tell me anything? And I used to get upset with him, almost like it felt like he was hiding things from me. And I would think, what else are you hiding from me? And I didn't realize it at the time that he was just trying to protect me. He didn't want me to be bothered by a lot of the stuff he saw and dealt with over those 13 years. In April of 2018, he was about 3 months into his new sergeant position. He was trying to be the best sergeant he could. He was going on calls. He was helping out his platoon, trying to do all the sergeant duties. And I thought our life was perfect. We had, up to this point, no issues. We had a great marriage. We had wonderful, healthy kids. We both had really great jobs. We had a lovely home. And it literally came out of the blue one day. He had a day shift and he walked home, or sorry, excuse me, he came home through the front door and he just started crying. And in 19 years of us being together, I think I'd only seen him cry a couple times, maybe at family funerals. So I was completely shocked and didn't know what was going on. So I asked him, like, what's wrong? What's going on? And he said, there's something wrong with me. I can't concentrate at work. I can't focus. People are asking me questions and I keep asking them to repeat it. He was in tears, kind of shaking a bit. And I said, and then he said, I haven't been able to sleep. I don't know what's going on. So I said, you know, go into our room and lay down for a few minutes. I will make dinner and I'll come check on you. And I went back in the room and we had some conversations. He started telling me a little bit more that he felt like it's been like almost 2 months straight where he just can't get a solid night of sleep. And I thought, well, that's the problem. You just can't sleep. You need a good night of sleep. You know, maybe call in sick tomorrow and rest a little bit. And we went to bed that night, and the next morning when I woke up, Sylvain was already in the bathroom and he was crying and he was shaking. And I thought he was having a stroke. I thought he was having a seizure. I've never seen him in so much distress. And I asked him again, oh my gosh, what is going on? What is wrong? And he said, I don't know, I still can't sleep. And so I said, well, I'll run out to the drugstore. I'll get you something to sleep. You know, you just need to sleep. You can't keep this pace. You can't keep working and going to kids' hockey and working out and everyday life if you're not sleeping. And he said to me, I don't think you can leave me alone right now. And I was shocked. I didn't really know what he meant at first. And I said to him, are you having thoughts of hurting yourself? And he said, yes, I don't think you, I think you need to take me to the hospital. So I was completely shocked. I didn't know what was going on. I made arrangements to drop the kids off at my brother's house, and I proceeded to take him to the hospital. And we sat outside of the merge for about 45 minutes. I couldn't talk him into even walking in the doors with me. He was so ashamed because he knew the staff that worked there. He had brought people there on his shifts. He didn't want to walk in and have to tell someone that he needed help. And I finally talked him into coming in with me. We went through triage, and we met with a crisis intervention worker, and I sat out in the hallway. I was not allowed in the room with him, and they talked to him for about 2 hours. And I was scared and confused. I didn't know what had just happened to my husband. I didn't know what was going on. We left that appointment they handed him a prescription and sent him home with me. And his prescription was for an anti-anxiety medication and he had a major sleep disorder. So he had a sleep medication and an anti-anxiety medication. And that's all the information I was given, and we went home. Over the next week, I took a week off work to be with him so we could try and figure out what was going on. I sat with him while he called his staff sergeant to tell her he needed time off. He couldn't even really verbalize to her what was going on, let alone that he was having suicidal thoughts. And a few days later, we had to go back to the hospital and follow up with the psychologist. So I went to this meeting, this initial appointment with a psychologist. And when they called his name to go in the room, she pointed at me and she said, no, 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 you stay here. This is just for him. So I did what I thought I was supposed to do. And we walked out of that appointment with, again, no information. Sylvain, when I asked him, you know, what did you talk about? What is going on? He couldn't remember anything that they had discussed. So when I got home, I called the office and asked if I could speak to the psychologist further. Due to patient confidentiality, she couldn't tell me a whole lot other than he was diagnosed with anxiety and a sleep disorder, and that he needed to be off work for a while. We thought we were doing everything we were supposed to do. Sylvain took some time off. I think he was off for about 6 weeks. He was devastated that he just got this new promotion as a sergeant and now couldn't be at work with his coworkers. He was leaving his shift short. People that are supposed to rely on him couldn't rely on him anymore. People started texting him, wondering what was going on. He didn't want to tell anybody anything. I tried to respect that he didn't want people to know what he was going through. I didn't realize at the time what it meant to him about getting his use of force taken away. So after 6 weeks, he went back to work for about another week and a half. He was put on desk duty. And him and the other people in his platoon that were off would go out for lunch, and they would find jobs to do around the office. And he would drive home from work every day and cry. He felt completely useless. He started questioning, why did I become a police officer? What's wrong with me if you know, I can't be there with my platoon and going on calls? Going back to work on desk duty jobs and having his use of force taken away, I think was worse for him than just being off. So he went back off work again. The guilt that he had about being off, I've never experienced him feel so awful about something before. He started telling me that he was having flashbacks from calls that he had been on 10 years earlier, 5 years earlier, things that he had never thought about before, and for some reason they were starting to come to play. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat, he stopped working out. We had some really tough discussions. I started asking him if he had a suicide plan. He was open with me about it. He said he did. The day before he came home and had a breakdown after his shift, he had driven to work and was trying to hit another car head on. But because it was 5 a.m. in the morning on the way to his shift, there was no other cars on the road. So that didn't work. So his plan was the day after, on the Sunday after I took him to the hospital, his plan was to go to work and shoot himself with his gun. But he didn't, because I took him to the hospital instead. I often asked him if he had a suicide plan or if he was having thoughts of hurting himself. And he kept telling me, no, I would never do that. I know now that was in the past, and I know now to get help. And I believed him. He wasn't a child. He was a 37-year-old man that I trusted, and I had no reason to think he wanted to die. I knew he loved our kids. He loved our family so much. I didn't think he would die. He kept seeing his psychologist regularly. And again, I didn't attend any of his appointments. This is something I definitely regret. It's something that you can see in hindsight. When you're in the moment and experiencing it, it's really difficult to know what are the right and wrong things to do. And if Sylvain had cancer, like a brain tumor, there's no question I would have been allowed in all of his appointments with him. I would have known what the treatment plan was. I would have known what to look for if things got worse. And I compare a mental illness to like a brain tumor. It affects everything to do with control over your mind and body. I started noticing changes in Sylvain. It was like he was walking around in a fog all the time. He'd be sitting beside me, but it was like there was nobody there. He could be staring off into the distance, and I could see his mind was just spinning constantly. And if I'd asked him, is everything okay, or what are you thinking about, or what's going on, he wouldn't be able to say anything. He then started to develop a temper. Sylvain never got angry easily before, and he would lose his shit very quickly and very easily for the most mundane things that didn't warrant his angry, aggressive reactions. And I felt like I would have to, I was not worried he would harm me or harm the kids in these moments, but I felt like I had to monitor what was going on to make sure that he didn't get the kids in trouble for something that was ridiculous. After his temper, I noticed changes in his temper. He then started to become paranoid. He was paranoid about the OPP and his job. He thought they've hired a private investigator, somebody is following him. They're gonna think he's lying about being off work. He thought he was gonna lose his job. All of this stuff that was not really happening. And I finally convinced him, let's go sit down and meet with your supervisor, because I really just needed his staff sergeant to tell him that all these paranoia thoughts are not true, and that he's not going to lose his job for taking time off. And I remember driving to the detachment, and Sylvain started having panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And again, I couldn't even get him to walk in the front doors with me. We sat in the detachment parking lot for about a half an hour. And we went and met with his staff sergeant. And this was probably the first time his staff sergeant really knew the extent of what was going on with Sylvain. Before that, any communication they had was very surface level. It was very, I just need time off. I don't know what's going on with me right now. His staff sergeant was more than supportive the whole entire time. He kept reassuring Sylvain to take time for himself and get himself better. And when we went and met with him, I think when he realized Sylvain could barely even form sentences, he realized how bad of shape he was in. And we sat there and met with him for about an hour. He handed Sylvain an EAP brochure and, reassured him to take the time he needed to get better. And he also started telling Sylvain all the reasons why they chose him and hired him as a sergeant. It was because of the way he treated other people. It was the way people respected him, how he dealt with situations, the fact that he didn't have acting time or this was a new detachment didn't matter. It was because of the person he was. He told him that he was not going to lose his job. that, you know, the OPP wasn't investigating him, he pretty much squashed all the paranoia. And we were driving home from that meeting, and I said to him, so, you know, I was feeling really positive. I said, how do you feel like that went? And he said, oh, it was fine. I think we need to sell our trailer. And I was confused. It was like his paranoia went from his job to something else to something else. He was then worried about our finances and how we were going to pay for hockey and how we were going to pay for our camp trailer for the summer. And I was confused and couldn't believe that we just had this amazing meeting with his boss, and now he's talking about selling stuff. So I felt defeated again. I started researching a little bit more on my own. I thought he had depression, PTSD. He was never diagnosed with PTSD. After he passed away and I got all his medical records from the psychologist, he never talked to a psychologist about anything to do with work, which is why he was never diagnosed. They were talking about things to do with his childhood, and you know, never even got to the topic of conversation of his job and trauma and you know, the stress of the job. And this really upset me. If I had been there in his appointments with him, I could have known what was going on, and that he was telling his psychologist everything she needed to hear just so he could go back to work. He wasn't actually telling her anything that was really going on. I researched treatment centers, treatment facilities. Sylvain had not turned to unhealthy forms of coping. He did not, he actually quit drinking, he quit coffee, did not turn to drugs or other addictions. So when I researched treatment centers and treatment facilities, there was nothing that fit his criteria. I thought he just needed to go away to meet other people that were going through the same thing as him, that could understand, and he could concentrate on working on himself away from the distractions of kids and what was going on at home. And all my researches came up empty. I had found treatment facilities in the States, but the expense was ridiculous. We thought we were doing everything we were supposed to. He tried calling EAP. However, again, without him telling them too much information, you know, they were going to make him an appointment for a week, and it was going to be a telephone call. So the EAP wasn't a good option for him. On Tuesday, July 31st, 2018, a few days before the day Sylvain passed away, we had a conversation about trying to change his medications. You know, he was on all these medications, but nothing seemed to change. Nothing was working. So he changed up his medications, and it was almost like within a couple days, a light switch went off, and he completely went back to the normal old Sylvain that I knew. I thought this change in medications helping. He was sleeping, he was smiling again, he was being social. That weekend we were out at our trailer, and he started fixing everything that was broken. I had hope. I had hope that things were going to get better. And I remember going home on Sunday night and telling him, do you realize you just had 2 really great days? You haven't cried, you seem happy again. Things are going to get better. This is going to get better for us. And 2 days later, on July 31st, I woke up and went to work, and he stayed home with the kids. I called him about 9:30 in the morning, and we had a conversation. I was asking him about his plans for the day. He told me he was going to stay at the house for the morning, and then go down to the harbor and take the kids fishing for the afternoon. We had made plans to move to town. We had a country property, and it was starting to become a lot of upkeep with him struggling with his mental illness and being busy with kids. So we had decided we were going to move into town. And that day at 4:30, we were going to meet at the builder's house and put in our offer on our new house that we were going to build. And I hung up the phone with him because somebody was needing me at work. And that was the last conversation I had with him. At about 2:30 in the afternoon, my brother texted me and asked me, is everything okay with Sylvain? And I said, yes, why? And he said, well, he dropped the kids off here a couple hours ago and said he needed to go into work and fill out some paperwork. And I thought, well, that's strange, because when I talked to him, he didn't tell me anything about needing to go to work. I had been helping him with all his paperwork. So I texted him, I called him, he wouldn't answer. I texted his boss to see if maybe he was still at work. I got a pit in my stomach that started to grow. And I called my boss and told her, I think I need to leave work. I can't get a hold of Sylvain. There's something wrong. And I walked out of work, and I had taken our car to work that day, but our minivan was in the parking lot. So I thought that was strange. If he ever switched cars with me before, he would have told me, or he would have came in and said hi. So I got in our van and started driving home. I thought, well, maybe he went home and he fell asleep. You know, this was all very confusing. I kept trying to call him on my way home. And as I got home, our car wasn't in the driveway. So I knew he wasn't at the house. But I was gonna just leave and go to my brother's house and wait for him to come home, or come to my brother's place. But something propelled me to walk in the house. I don't know why, but I walked in the front door, and all I could smell was chicken. He had put chicken in the crock pot, so we would have dinner ready for us that night. And I looked around the house, and everything was tidy and cleaned up. And I walked into our bedroom, and our bed was made. And on our bed was a handwritten note. And I knew as soon as I saw it, he had left me a suicide note. I started reading through it frantically, and it was very mean. It was very harsh. In the note, he wrote that he thought he had HIV, and that's why all this was happening to him. And this was the first time those 3 letters ever came up in our marriage. So it obviously scared the heck out of me. And I frantically read through this note. And at the bottom, he wrote, if the police are looking for me, this is where I am. And he named his location. So I frantically called 911 and told the dispatcher, I think my husband just committed suicide. I thought he's just sitting there, you know, waiting for someone to come and help him. He's waiting for me to come get him. And after talking to the dispatcher a little bit, my brother immediately came to the house, and my best friend came to the house. And I thought I should probably tell her that he's an OPP officer. So I told her, by the way, he's an OPP sergeant. And she paused, and she said, oh my God, what's his name? And I told her his name. And I thought she hung up the phone on me, but she came back and she said, oh my gosh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I know Sylvain. I've dispatched him for years. I've met him at comm center. We're family, and we're gonna find him. And she immediately sent 2 officers to the house to wait with me. And she knew exactly who to send. And about a half an hour later, they arrived at my house and they walked in the front door, and I hugged them both. And I said, did they find him? And they said, yes. And I said, is it too late? And they said, yes. My brother and I collapsed to the floor in each other's arms. And my whole world went black. I can't even describe the shock in that moment. And very quickly, people started showing up at my house. And I started telling Sylvain's true boss and his very close friend that had come to deliver the news to me, who they needed to contact. I was worried about some of his close coworkers. My brother called my parents. I had to get a hold of Sylvain's family. And within a couple hours, I had all these people at my house. The OPP had sent me a child psychologist, an inspector to help me plan a funeral. The wellness unit showed up. I had a family liaison person. His staff sergeant showed up at my house. I had all these resources and support, but it was 3 months too late. I felt like I didn't have any resources or support to support him when he was going through stuff. We thought we were doing everything we were supposed to. We thought he was getting better. The coroner came to my house, obviously had some questions. I told him what had been going on with his struggle. And he said to me, sometimes that's a sign when they start acting like they're back to normal. It's a sign that they've made a decision to end their life, and the weight of that decision's been lifted off their shoulders. And I thought, how come nobody told me that before? After a few weeks, the coroner did get back to me and let me know that Sylvain, in fact, did not have HIV. And he died in his car of carbon monoxide poisoning. The next day, I had to tell my kids. I knew this was going to be one of the hardest moments of my life. The child psychologist that the OPP sent us was phenomenal. He was probably the best resource I could have asked for. He sat down with me and my family and came up with a script of how we were going to tell the kids. He wanted to know each of the kids' personalities and the relationship with their dad in detail. And he predicted how they were going to react and what questions they were going to ask. And it was unbelievable. The next morning, because they had stayed over at a friend's house, the next morning, my brother picked up the kids and brought them to the house. And it was my parents and my brother and sister-in-law. And the kids ran in the front door and they were all excited to tell me about their sleepover. And I knew I was about to crush their whole entire world. That this moment was going to change their lives forever. And I sat them down on the couch in front of me, and I had rehearsed my script in my head over and over again. And I looked into their little faces and said, yesterday Daddy died. And I just waited for the reactions, and they started crying, and my oldest started screaming and yelling and asking questions. And all our family was crying. And it was the worst thing I've ever had to do in my life. Shortly after that, we had to start planning a funeral. The inspector from the OPP that his duty was to help me plan this funeral, started telling me about all the things the OPP could offer. They could have armed guard and lined his coffin in the Ontario flag and all these very honorable things. And I was really confused. I said to him, I said, why are you doing this? Don't you only do this for officers that die in the line of duty? Because I honestly thought that's the way it worked. And he said, no, Sarah, we do this for everybody. It doesn't matter how they died. And that line stuck with me for a while. And I thought, you know what, you're right. It doesn't matter how he died. It mattered how he lived. He spent 13 years being an amazing police officer and an amazing father, amazing husband and person. Why do we focus on how he died? You know, he was a hero. I need the kids, I need everybody to realize and to see at this funeral that he was a hero, and it didn't matter how he died. And that conversation is what sparked a lot of change in my views, and the choice we made that day that we had to share Sylvain's story. And I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know how it was going to play out. I just knew that we needed to tell other people what had happened to him so we can prevent this from happening to other first responders, because nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about suicide, and you hear about it, and what does that look like? So one of my first tasks was to write his obituary, and I had never written an obituary before. And I didn't even know how to start it off. How do you write, you know, an obituary for a young person, a police officer, someone who died by suicide? And I knew I didn't want people talking behind my back. It didn't bother me. We weren't ashamed about how he died because we knew the person he was when he lived. And I had an idea for his obituary, and I had to pass it by all of our family to make sure they were okay with it. And I decided to do this. Sylvain Francois Joseph took his life on Tuesday, July 31st, 2018, after a brief battle with a mental illness. I put his police photo and we put it out there. I did not realize, I did not know how much attention his obituary would gain. I had some media contacting me, asking me if I'd be willing to talk openly about, you know, what had happened. When we decided to put it out there how he passed away, we then had another very difficult conversation with my two oldest kids about suicide. And then we started to plan a funeral. And we quickly realized with his obituary and his funeral, it was gaining a lot of attention and a lot of people were coming. We ended up having about 1,000 people attend his funeral. I had to switch the location last minute from a church to our local arena. It was fitting because that's where Sylvain played hockey. That's where he coached our kids. That's where I worked and where we watched our billet sons play hockey. I decided to do the eulogy at his funeral. Again, a very difficult thing I had to do. but I had a message. I wanted to get a very clear message to everybody that came, to all the first responders and the organizations that came to his funeral. And at the time, the message was that I was the first person to notice things were not right with Sylvain. I was the first person he started talking to me about there's something wrong with me. But I had no resources or support from his organization for 13 years as a police wife. I didn't know what his association offered. I didn't know what the EAP program offered. And at the time, there wasn't things like OPP Beyond the Blue or Canada Beyond the Blue. There wasn't the OPP's Encompass program that they have now. I didn't know about Wounded Warriors Canada, Boots on the Ground, Project Trauma Support. There's so many resources now that I wish I would have known about then. Shortly after Sylvain passed away, 2 other OPP officers also committed suicide. I credit their families for also being open about their loved ones passing, because when it hit the media that 3 OPP officers in 3 weeks died by suicide, it gained attention and something had to be done. The OPP commissioner at the time held a press conference and committed to doing an internal review of their entire organization's mental health programs. I was part of that review. They did come and meet with me and my family and ask some really hard questions about what should be done differently. We were open with them and decided we wanted to try and help and make change. About 8 months later, the OPP released their internal review, which had approximately 151 recommendations of change within their organization. Everything from their wellness program to how they communicate about officers passing away. They had things about the promotional process. And one key thing that I was very fortunate to be involved in was a way to honor their officers that died by suicide. And I'm proud that the OPP is the first organization in Canada to have an OPP suicide memorial for their members. And my hope is that other agencies will follow through and also find ways to honor their members that have died by suicide. The commissioner himself asked me to be part of the advisory board. For the last 1.5 years now, I've been able to attend meetings and see the progress and the change that's happened. It's been an honor to be a part of it and feel like Sylvain still has a voice. A few weeks after Sylvain passed away, I found another letter from him. It fell out of a book. I was shaking books because I was looking for clues, to be honest. And it fell out of a book called Hockey Drills and Skills, a book I had given him for Christmas a couple years earlier. And I don't know if the second note was something that he meant for me to find, or it was supposed to be his original suicide note and then he changed his mind. I'm not really sure. But in the second note, it was very much the loving and caring Sylvain that I knew. But he talked about how much he felt like he was a burden, how much he felt like he was a burden on me and our kids and our family. And I wish I could have had the chance to tell him that everything we were going through was not a burden. This is a burden. I now have to bring our kids to a grave site. This was the first Father's Day without him, where they made crafts at school and brought them to his cemetery stone. This burden far outweighs any burden you could possibly feel like you're putting on your loved ones if you're struggling with an illness. The house we were planning on putting an offer in on the day he passed away. I decided to move there, and I had a big decision of what to do with this massive hockey rink that used to be in our backyard. And with the help of a lot of volunteers, we were able to donate it to a local park near where we lived. And in January 2019, the Sylvain Routhier rink opened, and it was really great to see our kids and all the neighborhood kids get to use the hockey rink that Sylvain built for the last 3 winters. In November of 2019, with the help of a few of Sylvain's very close police friends, I incorporated a foundation. I wanted to do something more to raise awareness about suicide and mental illnesses in first responders. So I created the Sylvain Routhier Memorial Foundation, and our foundation does fundraising events such as hockey tournaments and golf tournaments. And to date, we've raised over $35,000, which we have donated back in terms of scholarships for high school and college students going into first responder careers. And we've also helped fund first responders get to treatment that's not otherwise covered by their workplaces. I made a choice to turn my grief and my pain into something good. And it's something I feel proud of, and something that I hope my kids will feel proud of someday. I can't tell you how lonely it is after you lose your person that you're with every single day. I was very, very fortunate to get to fall in love again and meet an incredibly supportive man. Tim is very encouraging, lets me do things like this, helped me create the foundation. And this past summer, we got married and we combined our family, so we now have 5 kids. And it's a challenge every day to love someone new and to think about Sylvain. I decided to, during COVID, I obviously got asked to speak a lot and was traveling all over the place. And I'm sure you can only imagine how draining and difficult this can be on me. So I decided to write a book, thinking that I could stop talking to groups. So if you haven't had a chance yet, you can check out and purchase the book. It's available on Amazon Chapters. It's on Kobo, and I haven't announced it yet today, but as of today, it's also available on audiobook through Amazon, iTunes, and Audible, excuse me. So here's all my information if you want to follow anything that I am doing coming up, if you want to get a copy of the book.